Okay, it being just past 6 p.m., I'll go ahead and call the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors Special Orders to session for September 1st, 2020. The county clerk has verified the roll. We do have a quorum. All members are present except for Supervisor Warnke and Supervisor Spellman. Supervisor Warnke did ask to be excused today. First items on the agenda are the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Supervisor Locke. If you could please all stand and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the invocation by Supervisor Locke. Please go ahead, Supervisor Locke.
Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work. Help us to work together and encourage each other to excellence. We ask that we would challenge each other to reach higher and further to be the best we can be. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Supervisor Locke. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of this evening's agenda. For that, I will call on Supervisor Albrecht for a motion to adopt.
I move to adopt this evening's agenda.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That motion carries. Moving on down to the next item on the agenda, and that's a time in each agenda in which we allow an opportunity for anyone from the public to speak on any item on this evening's agenda or any item under county jurisdiction. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak this evening? If you do, please go ahead and raise your Zoom hand, and then I'll go ahead and call on each of you in succession. Okay, I believe Katie Campbell has asked to speak. Please go ahead if you could just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Katie Campbell. I live at 614 Wagoo Avenue. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. I want to try and give you a brief philosophical and historical perspective on the potential consequences of considering health equity and considering and adopting racism as a public health crisis. I spoke up at a county board meeting back in late June. I passionately expressed my overall concern with racism as a public health crisis. Morally, you all need to be asking yourselves if racism should be in the same category as a virus. Viruses, while alive, are not humans. They are closer to an object. Racism, while evil, involves humans. Should humans be in the same category as an object? And I would argue no, and here is why. The racist is not defined in your health equity packet. I would argue that according to the obesity map found in your health equity packet, the data is alluding to more conservative rural areas as racist. Simply because the packet does not break down obesity rates by race, but by area. Why does a health equity packet that philosophically suggests that health involves racism provide information that breaks down obesity by area versus race within that area? In a time when our president is considered racist and the patriot is considered racist, data like this is very concerning to me because this data does not prove that race or racism is connected to obesity, but area and potential political demographics are connected to racism and obesity. Last time I spoke, I also alluded to the French Revolution and how power and control was ushered in through public health. I would argue that what is occurring today is simply a repeat of Germany, Russia, and China all within the 20th century. For all of these revolutions replaced capitalism with communism in some sort of degree. And all of these revolutions blame certain groups of people for their country's problems. The racist or the patriot is currently being blamed today. Historian, philosopher, and Nobel Peace Prize winner Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who survived Stalin, was warning America in 1983 in his Templeton Address. He said the following: Men have forgotten God. The failings of human consciousness have been a determining factor in all the major crimes of the century. Atheist teachers in the West are bringing up a younger generation in a spirit of hatred of their own society. Amid all the abusive language, we have forgot that under communism, and communism is breathing down the neck of all moderate forms of socialism, that societal flaws run riot in any person with the least degree of authority, while everyone else under that system does indeed attain equality, the equality of destitute slaves. Historians and philosophers have provided warnings of dark times throughout history. I am warning you that the United States is currently having its turn at a Marxist revolution. That is means enough to not allow racism as a matter of public health. Racism as evil needs to be dealt with, but not as a matter of public health. All that will do will open the door for humans to be treated as objects, just like humans were treated in all other Marxist revolutions throughout history. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak this evening? If you do, just please go ahead and raise your Zoom hand and we'll call on you in succession. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak this evening? Just go ahead and raise your Zoom hand and I'll call on you in succession. I'll ask one more time. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak this evening? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close that portion of the agenda and we will move on to the next item, and that's reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Any reports from any committees, commissions, and boards from any supervisor, please go ahead and raise your Zoom hand and I'll call on you in succession. Any reports from any commissions and boards? I don't see any. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's County Board Chairman's report. So as I mentioned earlier, Supervisor Warnke asked to be excused. Just wanted to give you an update on the District 27 vacancy. That was former Supervisor Weiss who moved out of the district. We have had a couple candidates. We also did the public announcement period. I've reached out to the two individuals, and so just waiting to coordinate a time to speak with them further. Hoping to have a candidate for board approval by the September 15th meeting. If that couldn't happen, then certainly it would be by the October meeting, but still hoping for September 15th. And then just want to let you know that that the new mobile command post was delivered to the sheriff's office last week on August 26th. Linda Coleman mentioned that it exceeded their expectations. So they were very happy with what they received. So just kind of want to let you know that it has arrived, and they're certainly happy with the product that they got. And then I wanted to mention one other thing, well, two other things. One, I mentioned at the last meeting that the WCA had a task force on the health officer authority. And I mentioned at that time that I believe that they were close to having a final report. So there is a final report. So we'll see and work to get you all that report. Now remember, it's guidance. There is no model ordinance or specific recommendation that they give. They give guidance of what could be considered if you were to put forward an ordinance. Interestingly, it's very much to me a legal document in my view. And I guess the take home that I got from it, once again, we'll certainly find a way to share it. I think it's actually on the WCA website already. But the take home I got from, once again, I'm not an attorney though, was that if you were to have an ordinance that you would want to have some sort of legislative review of it, oversight or approval of an order, except in emergency situations. So in other words, any sort of order that would relate to the full county, for example, their guidance would be to consider have legislative oversight, approval of that such order. Once again, I'm very much paraphrasing. I'm not an attorney. We'll make sure you have the link to the document. But that was my take home on it, which actually is not surprising to me. I've had side conversations with different folks over the past couple of months about that very same thing. We've certainly heard from folks who also expressed that view. So just wanted to let you know about that, and we'll make sure you get a link to that. And then just wanted to make you aware of one thing. I was asked about planning ahead for our schedule in February of 2021. In February 2021, the third Tuesday happens to fall on an election day. That's February 16th. Our county board rules, actually it's rule 1.1, says that if the meeting date, the third Tuesday, falls on an election day, then we are to have it on the fourth Tuesday of the month. The reason I'm just telling you all that is because what that would mean, based on how we normally do things, is we would have meetings back-to-back weeks, because the fourth Tuesday of that month would it be the 23rd, and because February is a short month, the following Tuesday is March 2nd or 3rd, I think 3rd, and that would be a special orders. So at the moment, I'm going to follow our rule. However, I wanted to put that out there to the group because if you all had thoughts, and or if perhaps we should at least talk about and maybe judiciary consider whether that rule could be considered to be different. So, for example, if it fell on the election day on the third Tuesday, maybe the second or fourth. But I'm going to follow our rules right now, so I'm telling you that. But I wanted to make you aware of that because perhaps the board would want to go in a different direction to avoid having back-to-back weeks. So just pre-planning it and making you aware. And I basically am telling you, I welcome everyone's thoughts on this, and we have someone's before that. And that was all of my announcements. I do see one call in from Supervisor Powers, so I'll go ahead and call in Supervisor Powers. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One, I guess I'm surprised that there's an election on a third Tuesday. I thought they were much earlier in the month than that. And number two, we're certainly capable of having back-to-back Tuesday after Tuesday meetings. With this much notice, I don't see that having a meeting one Tuesday and then the following Tuesday is an issue. It should not be an issue. It's a sort of once in the blue moon thing. We can do that. We're big people. We can do that.
I appreciate that, and that's useful to know, Supervisor Powers. And then it's on that Tuesday because that's one of the primary dates. So it's the spring primary, so that's why you get it on that third Tuesday. So once again, I'm perfectly fine with doing back-to-back, but I did want to get your thoughts on it nonetheless, in case the overall board felt differently. I was asked about this over the last week. I thought there was value in one, reviewing that rule with everyone, and two, getting as much input from you all as possible. Okay, seeing no other questions or call-ins, we'll go ahead and close that portion. Now tonight, as a special orders, we have 3 presentations this evening. So the first one is the Internet Crimes Against Children presentation by Investigator Mike Sewell and Winnebago County Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Motz. Investigator Sewell and Sheriff Motz.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to present tonight. Our room is big enough we can socially distance, so the presenters will not be wearing a mask.
Very good. I understand. Thank you.
Yes. First, I want to introduce Mike Sewell. He's an investigator for our agency. He began his career with the county in 2013, where we shared a position with the district attorney's office, and he worked on various projects for both of us. It was very clear early on that his specialty was internet crimes against children. He's going to talk about all of the cases, or many of the cases that he has had, and the children that have been saved. He has initiated large undercover operations for quite a period of time, and again, he'll get into more of the detail surrounding that. Also with us is Supervisory Special Agent Trevor Sisk. He is assigned to the FBI field office. He oversees the Milwaukee's Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Task Force, which is comprised of local, state, and federal law enforcement partners and includes Winnebago County. He's going to talk a little bit about his experiences with our agency and that partnership that we have with them. With that, I'll introduce, or I'll bring up Mike.
Afternoon. Everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you well.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to do a quick test of the volume to make sure that you guys can all hear each bit of the presentation. Did you all hear that?
Yes, we could hear that.
Okay, beautiful.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate your time. I'm excited to present to you guys a little bit about the ICAC task force that we have here at the Sheriff's Office. As Sheriff Smots mentioned, I've been here since 2013, and since 2015, I've been working primarily in internet crimes against children. So here's a little bit about what we do. So a vast majority of what I do as an ICAC investigator is I conduct proactive online undercover investigations. So this could be posing as a child online. It could be posing as an adult online interested in children. And these undercover investigations take place on all different websites, all different applications on your smartphone. Anywhere that kids would be, that's where I'm at. My goal with these proactive undercover investigations is to be a type of a silent shield for the kids out there. And instead of being preyed upon, they prey upon me as an investigator. So I try to take their spot in that scenario and take care of them on our end. Another thing that we do is peer-to-peer child exploitation material investigations. So these are videos and images of child sexual assaults that occur. It is a growing problem. We see it all the time. We've been involved in cases where there has been millions of videos and images shared and stored on people's computers right here in our county. We've made a number of arrests for what we call child sexual abuse material investigations. And that's a big portion of what we do. And that is a really demanding portion of our job, as we have to actually sit and watch all of those videos and review all those images and watch those offenses take place. Another thing that we take on are cyber tips. So cyber tips come from all the different social media platforms and websites. So for example, Facebook. Facebook could see something going on their website that's inappropriate. It could be a picture that was sent, a conversation that's taking place. If something gets flagged by them, they send out a tip to the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, and then they farm that information out to the Department of Justice here in Wisconsin. And if it lands here in Winnebago County, it gets assigned to me and my counterparts in our detective division, and we investigate that. Cyber tips are growing every single year. Again, I can't reiterate how much of a problem this is and how much of a truly growing problem that this is. Recently, so as early as January this year, we began working with our federal partners at the FBI, and we're conducting an international undercover operation. And I'll get into more detail later in that, and I'll let Trevor kind of go into depth on our partnership with that operation. So we have a national and international collaboration when it comes to these investigations. So I work closely with our federal partners. I work closely with our state DOJ partners with these investigations. And through all the training and experience that I've had as an investigator, I have other entities in other states. We have a really good relationship with the Pennsylvania State Attorney General's office. We've worked a number of cases with them together. And that's the beauty of internet crimes against children, especially in law enforcement. Anytime a child is involved, they are the most innocent of victims that we run across in this field. They're helpless. They can't help what's happening to them. So anytime as a law enforcement agency, we reach out to another law enforcement agency, it's really quick action. I think we can all agree, that these victims should take a priority, and they always do. Every time I reach out, the phone is always answered and the call is always answered, and action is taken almost immediately. Another aspect of my job is I do community and law enforcement training. So I reach out. I've worked with our high schools here in the community. We've worked on some projects for internet safety. I also have done, just various trainings for parents to kind of teach them, hey, this is what we're finding in the real world. These are the apps you need to look out for. Just basic internet safety. We also assist agencies and DOC with high-risk offenders. So we've grown to have a partnership with the Department of Corrections here in the state of Wisconsin. We work with their sex offender registry and those probation agents. So anytime they have someone that they believe is high risk or they get a tip about, that comes to my office and I investigate that myself. So I'm going to go over a quick case study of a guy that I worked on. So this was back in 2015. So this is Steve Young. As you can see, he's an 8th grade social studies teacher at Derby North Middle School in Derby, Kansas. So for this investigation, I was posing as a 14-year-old female online from Wisconsin. All these different logos you see up on the screen here, these are all the different websites and applications that we use to communicate. Now, this case originated in Teen Chat. And I hope you can all see the problem in an individual like Steve Young, who's a 41-year-old guy hanging out in Teen Chat on a Tuesday, middle of the morning. So that's where the conversation began. We bounced around to all these different websites and all these different platforms, and we spoke for about 4 or so months. And now I don't always spend that much time on an undercover case, but in this instance, when I realized that he was an 8th grade teacher and exposed to all the students in his classes throughout the day, that's a scenario where I'll work night and day, weekends, whenever I have to, in order to figure out what's going on with this target. All right, so this individual, this target, wanted to Skype with me, and I hope you all can see the problem with wanting to Skype with me, as I don't look too much like a 14-year-old girl. So Skype is a lot like Zoom, where it's face-to-face over camera, and I don't pull off that look very well. So I told him that my family didn't have much money and that I had an older computer and no webcam. So this is our interaction. As you can see, he's in his classroom. All the messaging on the right, that's me typing to him, and he's live on video with me.
I feel like I need to shave my cheeks. It's getting a little too much there. Well, I guess it's about time for me to go pick them up. So maybe I can catch you later. Bye.
So again, this is a conversation this guy is having in his classroom at his school with who he thinks is a 14-year-old girl. And the 2 people he said he was going to go pick up were his 2 kids, his 2 young girls. So now this conversation has went on for, like I said, 4 or 5 months. He hasn't done anything illegal yet, but I continue to work the case because of his access to children and his propensity to want attention from me posing as a 14-year-old girl. So now we're back at his home. He brought his school-issued iPad home to talk to me with his wife in the other room, and there's nothing graphic, so just a heads up on that.
Serious? Wow. I don't think I'm ready for all that yet. Well, I'm trying to decide with all that I've done today, like my run and being outside a lot and everything, trying to decide if I want to take a shower. Because you like clean sheets on the bed tonight and stuff. I need to put those on in a little bit. Well, then maybe I should let you watch me get ready to take my shower.
All right, so I spared you the rest of what happened there. Yeah, so he ended up exposing himself, doing things he shouldn't have in front of, we thought was a 14-year-old girl. And I always like to tell this story because it's kind of funny. So my job doesn't run 8 to 4. It never has since I started doing undercover work. It's not plausible that a 14-year-old girl would only be online from 8 a.m. when I start work here at the sheriff's office till 4 p.m. when I leave the sheriff's office, right? So this is something that I bring home every single night, every weekend, 6 a.m. till I go to bed. It's constant. And for this individual, it was worth me doing that because he was an 8th grade teacher and he had access to all these kids. But the funny story that I want to tell you is I had my laptop at home and my wife and I were watching Netflix, the series that we're really into. And I'd have my laptop talking to Steve with one headphone in, trying to have a conversation with him while also trying to watch my show with my wife. And again, he hadn't done anything illegal up until this night. And it gets really old talking to a guy for 5 months that you know is a child predator. So as soon as he did it, I jumped out of my seat and I gave my wife a high five. I was so excited that it was over. And she looked at me and she goes, I wonder if many other wives have to deal with this kind of celebration from their husband, seeing what you just saw. So that was just, one of those moments, when we got a good win here, right? We took a guy, a teacher, a trusted person in his community and to all these kids, and we exposed him for what he really was, and he's a child predator. So he was charged with electronic solicitation of a minor, sexual exploitation of a child, and possession of child sexual abuse material. So when Wichita, Kansas went in, they arrested him. He actually had child sexual abuse material on his school-issued iPad. And what made matters worse is that he had been taking pictures of the girls in his class, in his front row. And one of those girls was one of the ICAC commanders in Wichita, Kansas. So that didn't play out well for him. So he's sentenced to 61 months in prison for that. So I just want to give you a little rundown on some of the new trends that we've been seeing. Sextortion, which is basically, exploiting people online. Someone else playing the undercover and exploiting somebody. Online grooming of children. Again, I play a child every day online, so I see it in real life. They try to groom me. I can see the steps they're taking. I can see everything plain as day, but it's a real problem because these predators are everywhere on the internet. And then finally, the dark web. So I just want to give a quick example of what sextortion is. So this is Tevin Tobler from Davis County, Utah, 16 years old, honor student, champion wrestler. He took his own life in September of 2017. He had no trouble at home or school, no drug or alcohol abuse, no mental health issues. When investigators discovered, they looked at his phone. He has been speaking with a girl online who he had sent explicit images to. This girl was an unidentifiable man in the Ivory Coast of Africa. So they exchanged 1,000+ text messages back and forth. They said about every 30 seconds, this person would message Tevin. He finally ran out of money. So he had to pay this individual to keep his images off the internet. And to kind of drive this point home is I've worked 2 of these cases in the last 6 months right here in our county where this exact thing has happened. I'm sure you've received spam calls and all these different things and spam emails and stuff like that. This is the same thing, but it's on social media, and it's attacking, some vulnerable people that make mistakes online. So this is my I call my wall of shame. So we, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had over 200 arrests. And I'll let Trevor from the FBI kind of go through more of our operation currently. But all these people that you see are folks from around our area. These are all people in our county or adjacent counties that were trying to exploit a child. It got to be so much that that's why I had to start putting their pictures up, because I could not remember the case number compared to what I was working on. So if I had their face and I had their case number, I could go back, flip up their picture, take a look at the case number, and realize where I was at on that case. I mean, that's significant. So it just shows the issue the way it is and the work that we've been putting in here at the sheriff's office to try to combat this. So before we have any questions, I'll turn it over to, oh, I gotta stop sharing screen. All right.
Thanks, Mike. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Here, sure. Wave your hand. Thanks, Sheriff, for the invitation. Thank you, Board, for the invitation as well and the opportunity to kind of touch upon the FBI's relationship with Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. This relationship essentially started in January of this particular year. And if I recall correctly, it started when the U.S. Attorney in Green Bay kind of gave the FBI a heads up that, hey, there's an investigator in Winnebago County that you guys need to talk to. And that happens to be Mike. He shared with us pretty much the forward-leaning nature of Winnebago County's ICAC investigations and made a quick assessment that this was definitely something that the FBI could assist with, given its resources, its large reach, obviously nationally and internationally, and primarily the result of what that AUSA here in Green Bay had seen Investigator Sewall here do over the course of a number of years, a number of cases that were presented. So that's how our relationship started. That AUSA recognized that FBI has 56 field offices throughout the country in pretty much every state. There might be one or two that we don't have an office in, but there is an office that obviously covers those states. We have task force officers from, as the sheriff mentioned, from local, state, and other federal partners that help us with advancing our investigations. And we determined that it would be a great opportunity to add another TFO, specifically Mike, to our task force and work these cases collectively, given that, as Mike touched upon, you're talking about children who are the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, who are online, unsuspecting of people who are masking their true intent and motive, and obviously running directly towards children seeking to exploit them. So what happened is an agent out of our Green Bay office, we have a smaller office in Green Bay, initiated a case, what we call Kickboxer, which is essentially a larger case name for everything we do with Winnebago. And it's proven to be very successful. What we've done, at least on the FBI side of things, you heard what Winnebago does when they come across not only distributors, but more importantly, and I think this is something that benefits our relationship, we agreed on the priority targets here. Positions of public trust, hands-on offenders, right, who are child molesters, as well as essentially producers of child pornography. Those seem to be, everybody can agree that those are the worst of the worst and we need to go after them. So that's how we went about it. And so when we ingest the information from Winnebago County, what we do is we look at the profiles, we use some of our administrative process, administrative subpoenas to get subscriber and account information related to individuals, Mike or his counterparts, have engaged in an undercover capacity online. They're essentially passing it to us to action it, to action the intelligence and essentially to disseminate. We do that. Obviously, we analyze that subpoena information. We conduct database checks, open source record checks, right, to identify who is the person on the other end that our undercovers, Mike and his partners, are essentially communicating with. These are generally individuals who shared child pornography, or as it's now termed, child sexual abuse material. It's always going to be child pornography. But those are the runner. That's the high volume. There's a high volume of people out there. General public, unless you're looking for it, which you shouldn't be, of course, it's out there. Distributors look for each other. What we do prioritize, and everything else takes a back seat, is when through the undercover chats that Mike has with subjects on the other line, folks that are obviously producing or live streaming child pornography that he sees, he captures, or kind of give Mike or the investigators the inkling or the indication that they are hands-on offenders with either a child of theirs, a relative of theirs, or a neighbor of theirs. Everything else kind of drops. What we do, FBI, we submit agency requests, emergency requests to the service providers, asking them to quickly identify and provide us the account names and the individuals. Our analysts, we got a great analyst back at FBI Milwaukee who flips this information quickly, tracks it down. She's one of a couple folks that obviously team up on this type of behavior, this type of mission, and essentially the goal being to identify and action that information. So let's say there's a scenario where we get the information, there's the agency request, it comes back, figured out who the person is, generally, at least the residents, do some other checks to figure out, well, at this residence might be a husband, wife, a 9-year-old, who do we think it might be? Well, we're going to start with the husband, but I can tell you, and I'm sure Mike can tell you as well, we're not limited just husbands. Females have been targets as well in the course of this investigation and our collaborative partnership here. So what we do, FBI, case agent, or, well, more importantly, the case agent will quickly reach out to one of our field offices where we've determined this individual lives. We'll give them a heads up that there's a priority lead coming and that we are asking you to action this immediately. We've been able to turn several of these around within 24 hours and have a search warrant executed, child pornography identified, interviews conducted, generally, this may be surprising for a lot of you, confessions by the targets, and we go from there. Generally, criminal charges and multiple criminal charges stem from there. Obviously, we've been recipients of leads on our end, so what we prioritize and ensure that we take care of is when we send these type of priority leads downrange, they are fully baked leads, right? Not half-baked leads, fully baked leads that all the recipient FBI task forces on the other end, all they have to do is engage their U.S. Attorney's Office to get a search warrant, and they run with it. If it happens to be something that is within the state of Wisconsin, we would action it, the task force would action it, and we would do so immediately. A couple examples. One of our first, so if we started our relationship in January of 2020, one of our first agency requests stems from an individual who was in Florida. Mike was chatting with him online. That individual live streamed some live production of child pornography, I think with a 4-year-old child of that individual's. We submitted he passed that information to the FBI. FBI quickly submitted an agency request, got the identification of the individual. The individual happened to be down in Tampa, Florida, one of our smaller RAs. RAs is a smaller office, much like Green Bay is a smaller office of Milwaukee. The Orlando RA is a smaller office of FBI Tampa. That's where this individual lived. They turned, FBI's task force turned this around in less than 48 hours, executing a search warrant, obtaining a full confession of this particular individual, and recovered and saved a 4-year-old child who was the victim of this sexual abuse. Another example that occurred in early February as well. Here's the unique one. Individual out in California, I think sent videos and images of child pornography to Mike of that individual, an adult male, an adult female, and a child, all within the videos that were sent and images that were sent to Mike in his undercover capacity online. We were quickly able to turn that around as well, submitting exigency requests, identified the location, sent the leads out to California. Individual lived in Alpine, California, which is in our San Diego, FBI San Diego territory. They executed a warrant. Individual consented to an interview, also consented to a polygraph, right? Failed the polygraph though, which most people, either they know they're guilty, will not do the polygraph. Not something that you can easily overcome. And obviously that's the intent of that. In that particular case, that child was a 3-year-old child that we recovered, saved, and I think was removed from the house at least for a period of time. That was early on in our relationship, right? In February, our relationship, FBI and Winnebago County Sheriff's Office relationship. An example of one that occurred less than 2 weeks ago. Another situation, an OCE utilizing an undercover account, essentially, without divulging kind of some of the tactics and techniques, put himself out there as an individual who is otherwise known as a highly prolific trader of child pornography, a trader, distributor, back and forth. This individual also is an administrator of accounts, chat rooms where people go to and trade CP. So once people thought this was the guy, sure, this is him, no problem. Let's send images, let's send video, all that type of stuff. That's what happened. Started distributing it to multiple people, dozens of people within that same chat room. Essentially, in that particular case, the target of that investigation sent images of an adult male and a minor engaged in some. Another priority for us, obviously, to submit an exigency request, figure out who this person is. And I think that there was some discussions by one of the individuals within the chat room because the subject said, quote, "Love my little girl." Another individual in the chat room said, "Well, how old is she?" The individual said, "She'll be 4 in a few weeks," and then indicates he just took that picture of her, the child pornography picture that he had sent and distributed to the group. Obviously, that's something that needs to be actioned. We did so. We put together the lead, sent it to FBI Indianapolis. They actioned it within 24 hours, right? So that's one of those I guess, resources that we bring to bear with our relationships with our counterparts, our task force officers, our task force agencies, as well as anybody who wants FBI assistance. We will step up. You don't have to be on the task force, of course. We're all in the same fight, and that is to protect children and hold individuals accountable. So essentially investigative, I guess, the investigation to date from January of 2020 to essentially last week has resulted in essentially 1,500 profiles that Mike and his counterparts have identified as having traded child pornography. Again, priorities being hands-on offenders, producers, manufacturers, as well as individuals we come across who are I guess, habitual distributors, high volumes of child pornography. To date, roughly 108 individuals located in the United States. We forwarded 54 leads internationally. FBI has a presence in embassies and legat offices. We have a legal attaché, probably in 60 some odd territories overseas, and have the ability to action, don't hold me to that number, I believe it's 60 something, ability to action subjects who we find to be located overseas. Obviously, any way to protect children is what we want to do, and we will do it, and we have the reach to do it, and I think the counterpart and partnership that we have with Winnebago County speaks for itself, and we're happy to be in that type of position. To date, as I mentioned, FBI has initiated close to 60 full investigations as a result of our collaboration with Winnebago County Sheriff's Office, essentially over a dozen, close to 15 dissemination requests overseas, formal dissemination requests overseas. Our activities and our ability to send out leads to other offices has resulted in approximately 54 search warrants, 24 arrests, close to 2 dozen children recovered, and countless instructions in terms of our ability to action these and execute search warrants and get in front of individuals and recover children. We've had the ability, obviously, to, with the consent of the targeted individual, the subject, to take over accounts as well. Their profiles online. It provides Mike and the investigators access to other chat rooms they might not have that access to. And again, identify individuals that haven't been on our list up until that particular point. It's been a good partnership. I know the FBI has benefited from it. I'm hoping Winnebago County Sheriff's Office sees it the same way. We definitely look forward to continuing that relationship. Again, we're happy to use FBI resources to facilitate and leverage these investigations, because anybody who has kids, anybody who knows somebody who has kids, they are the beneficiaries of investigation and partnerships between local partners, federal partners, and utilizing all resources at their disposal. So that collaboration relationship has proven highly successful, produced multiple, I guess, demonstrative results, and definitely looking forward to the future as we've discussed different operational plans targeting different events. Obviously, COVID in and of itself has kind of limited those large gatherings, but we have a couple ideas on the table once things open up, whether that's be slowly or sometime in 2021. So again, appreciate the opportunity. Sheriff, again, appreciate the opportunity to be here. The board, thank you. I hope it's been enlightening. Mike and his crew here have been doing an excellent job. You should be proud of the folks you have working this particular violation. You want solid investigators whose hearts are in the right place and are highly skilled, such as the investigators you have here at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. So with that, I'll pass it over to Mike. Any questions you might have, Mike?
So yeah, I'll just reiterate, if anyone has any questions, feel free.
Very good. We'll open it up for questions. I do see several call-ins for questions and comments, so I'll go ahead and call them in succession. First is Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Nussbaum. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question for the sheriff. And I'm just wondering, John, what do you do to, Mike, am I turned up? I'm sorry.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay. I'm just asking, John, what is it that you do to protect Mike and his mental health from viewing this stuff on a constant basis? We hear that pornography is supposed to be quite addictive, or it's addictive. I don't know if it's quite addictive, but it's addictive. And if he's watching a lot, what is it that John and the Sheriff's Office is doing to protect Mike's mental health? That's my question.
No, I think it's all right.
Sheriff Motz, that was a question for you. Were you able to hear the question, Sheriff Motz?
No, sorry, we had some technical difficulties on our end.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Again.
Yep.
She's going to go ahead and ask it again. Please proceed, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, I was just wondering, we hear that pornography is quite, or at least somewhat, addictive. What is it that you and the Sheriff's Office is doing to protect Mike from his mental health from viewing this stuff on a, sounds like a pretty constant day after day basis? That's my question.
Yeah, we do offer, we do offer counseling to Mike, and he is assessed, as well as the other members who view a large number of videos and the exploitation and cases that are involved. Also, bringing in the FBI brings in resources for us to send Mike to Quantico if needed, and he's just done a phenomenal job. We continually check in with him. Captain Dave Mack checks in with him, as often as we need to, and we're making sure everything is okay with him and the team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff, and thank you for the question, Supervisor Powers. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Nussbaum, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank you guys for everything you do. God bless you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Defferty. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, again, just thank you to you and your team for doing very critical work, and not only just doing it, but doing it so well. One question I've had came up with a few of my friends too, was about the recent arrests in the Atlanta area, where they found 29 children as victims of a trafficking ring. And there's been really little that I've heard on coming through on media. Do you know why it would be so quiet when it's such a big deal?
Well, I think in most ongoing investigations, we try to limit the information because we don't want to jeopardize the investigation. And that is probably the case in this particular one. But the child pornography and the things that we're seeing go hand in hand with the trafficking of children and adults.
And just one more question, just out of curiosity, because I'm a numbers person. Is anyone following the correlation between legalizing pornography and the incidents we're finding through law enforcement?
Well, you know, as far as child pornography is illegal.
Illegal, yeah.
Yes, it's illegal. The adult pornography business has been around for many, many years. But child pornography is illegal. But again, as both the presenters stated, our focus are on the hands-on offenders, those that are producing it and those that are sharing large files.
Mm-hmm. So you don't know if there's a correlation between allowing pornography in general and the increase in child pornography?
I'm sure that they go hand in hand, but I don't know of any information that shows what that correlation would be.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I remember I worked on a team years and years ago to try to combat pornography. And that one of the things that, and Karen addressed that, is that it is a progressive, for those people who develop an addiction, it is a progressive type of thing. So it will lead them deeper and deeper and deeper. So anyway, thank you very much, and thanks for great work once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferting. Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question. I guess this is more for Sheriff Motz. But I wanted to discuss a little bit about victim advocacy. If we were to come about something like this, if the worst case scenario happens in Winnebago County, do we have connections to victim advocacy centers and such as local nonprofits such as Reach Counseling? And could you describe to me a little bit about our relationship with them? And
Yeah, we make those services available. The district attorney has somebody assigned to the office that is what they are, is the victim advocate. So regardless of the age, they'll work with the parents of the child or the legal guardian of the child or through social services. So yes, those services are provided to the victims, whether it's a federal case, state case, regardless.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker is Supervisor Binder. Please go ahead, Supervisor Binder.
My question would be is why Steve Young only got 61 months? It seems like an awful light sentence for basically making it tragic. That girl could have basically problems her whole life if it was a real situation. And I basically don't think 61 months in prison was near long enough. And he probably got out with basically 50 months. So why was the sentence so lenient for such a heinous crime?
We are seeing much longer sentences through the federal courts than what we would through our own local charging office. So I can't speak to why he only got 61 months, but certainly there are a lot of mitigating factors that go into that. He would be a lifelong registrant as well, so identified as a predator. So, I mean, there are some other checks and balances that occur besides the prison sentence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and close this portion of the agenda. I just want to thank all the presenters and the sheriff. I want to in particular thank Mike Sewell. He's obviously done a tremendous job. So thank you, Investigator Sewell, for all your effort on behalf of the community. Sorry. Thank you all for all your efforts, and certainly thank you all for the presentation. Very much appreciated.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Supervisor Finch.
I would also like to say, Mike and I can't think John and his staff. I mean, you know, the stuff they go through, I mean, it takes a lot. And they're doing this to make us, the citizens of Winnebago County, happy. And I just feel that when you come right down to it, Sheriff Motts, I've known now for a long time, and he's the type of a person that if you see him in the street or in a store or at the courthouse, he'll come right over and talk to you, which I like because of the fact if I have a question that I have forgotten about, he comes and talks. Then I can remember and then ask. But what I'm trying to say though is Mike and Steve are a fantastic asset to Winnebago County. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. And thank you all again for your presentation and all your efforts. Greatly appreciated. Okay, so we have two more presentations this evening. The second one is the overview of the Winnebago Waterways Lake Management Plan by Jessica Schultz and Corin Doring of the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance. Go ahead and open up your mic.
All right. I'll share my screen.
Very good. We can hear you well.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out. I think it's this one. We practiced this yesterday. Okay. Can everyone see it now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right. Perfect. Chad, were you gonna give an introduction?
Yes, I can do that. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Chad Casper. I am the Acting Director for the Land and Water Conservation Department. As many of you know, the Winnebago system is large. It represents about 17% of the surface water in Wisconsin. It is a tremendous resource that we have right in our backyard. It brings in millions to our local economy. However, the system has been showing signs of stress due to excess phosphorus, sediment, low dissolved oxygen, and excessive algae growth. So in order to start addressing these issues, there's been a collaborative process to improve the Winnebago system that's been ongoing since 2010. With funding from Calumet, Fond du Lac, and Winnebago counties, along with additional leadership from the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance, the Winnebago Waterways program was created. And one of the first goals of this program was to develop a Winnebago Waterways Lake Management Plan. This plan has been years in the making with significant amount of input from the Land and Water Conservation Departments and committees, the DNR, local governments, area organizations, property owners, and residents. The investment that this county has made and others into the Winnebago Waterways program is paying off dividends and will continue to as we move into implementation of this plan and ultimately improving the Winnebago system. Tonight, you're going to be given an overview of the Winnebago Waterways Lake Management Plan, and at your September 15th County Board meeting, there'll be a resolution on the agenda for you all to vote on the adoption of this plan. We definitely selected the right organization to lead this effort, and again, I'd like to introduce Corin Doring and Jessica Schultz from the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance, who will give everyone an overview of the first ever Winnebago Waterways Lake Management Plan. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Chad. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of dive right into this. Just make sure everything's working here. So I'm going to give this presentation, and it's basically an overview with some highlights from the introduction to the lake plan. It's a 12-page document that was part of your meeting packet. and then we'll get to questions. And Jessica is going to jump in to help answer questions that come up at the end. I want to thank you all for having us and giving us the time to share this plan with you. And I'll go ahead and just jump right in. So Chad alluded to in the introduction kind of that this has been an ongoing process since 2010. And I wanted to just give a quick refresher for everyone about kind of what's been happening since this all got started. So in phase 1, there was an ad hoc steering committee, including staff from the counties, that asked lake users and residents to identify key issues. And those key issues were, the top issues that were identified were algae blooms, polluted runoff, and aquatic invasive species problems. Then in phase 2, the steering team explored various options to try to find the best way to manage this enormous lake system that crosses multiple jurisdictions. The results of phase 2, like Chad said, the counties entered into an intergovernmental cooperative agreement, which created the executive committee. And Fox Wolf was chosen as the local nonprofit to develop and manage the Winnebago Waterways program. As we wrap up phase 4, phase 5 has already started. And so I'm going to provide a few highlights of what's going on for implementation later in the presentation. I want to really thank the Winnebago County's commitment to improving and protecting the Winnebago lakes. This really couldn't have been done without the involvement of the staff, the LCC, and the executive committee. They've been key in helping this progress. So you've all seen pictures like this and are familiar with the poor quality of the lakes, but I wanted to just take a second to remind everyone why coordinated management of the system is so important. And this year provided a perfect example of that. So these photos were taken in July of 2020 that from different areas in Lake Winnebago. And these are harmful blue-green algae blooms. This year they showed up as early as June, which impacts recreation, and these blooms pose a risk to human health. Poor water quality also affects shoreline property values and reduces the appeal of the lakes to potential tourists. This is kind of, because of photos like this, this is where the term lake winneseptic comes from, if you've ever heard anyone use that. But despite those problems, people in this region still really love their lakes, me and my family included. The lakes offer some of the most abundant and diverse recreational opportunities in the Midwest, and that really underpins the region's economy and local identity. So situated in the Fox Valley, the lake system serves about 522,000 people in a 5-county region, and as Chad said, it holds 17% of Wisconsin's surface water. So I know, like I said before, you all received a copy of a 12-page lake plan summary. For the sake of time in this presentation, I'm going to provide just a broad overview, highlighting a few key points. And then at the end, we'll hopefully be able to answer some questions. So the waterways within the recovery area are treasured resources that we strongly believe deserve immediate large-scale restoration and ongoing protection for generations to come. To be effective in an area of this size really requires commitment and active involvement from several entities in the region, including the counties, municipalities, conservation groups, clubs, businesses, and individuals. The goals of the lake plan are to improve water quality so that the waterways are fishable, swimmable, and aesthetically enjoyable, restore and protect habitat to support self-sustaining populations of fish and wildlife, increase use and enjoyment of the waterways, and build an engaged community that is supportive of recovery and protection efforts. The scale of restoration that's needed and the management of that restoration is going to require quite a bit of funding. So in addition to the plan providing a regional strategy for multiple partners to kind of tackle these issues together, having a completed and DNR approved plan also opens up the door for funding at both the state and federal levels. And so that's something that we've been looking to pursue in this next phase. So I talk about the Winnebago Waterways Recovery Area, and when I say that, I'm talking about 1,200 square miles of land and water. So while the goals of this plan are really focused on water, in order to see the improvements that we want to see, we also need to consider what's happening on land. This is why the recovery area is much larger than just the shorelines of the 4 Winnebago pool lakes. So looking at the land, we need to reduce the amount of surface water runoff that's coming from a variety of sources. So that means we need to reduce nutrient and sediment loading. And the plan recommendations identify the need to work with agriculture to reduce runoff volume and increase the quality of water that's running off by utilizing cover crops and no-till systems, installing agriculture runoff treatment systems, increasing available technical and agronomy support through staff at the county land conservation departments, working with urban communities to increase the adoption of best management practices by homeowners, and support urban stormwater permitted communities to meet increased permit requirements. We also identify the need to support permitted wastewater treatment plants as they work to meet increased permit requirements, as well as work with riparian property owners to reduce shoreline and stream bank erosion. So just to really hammer home what happens on our land is really being reflected in our waterways. In addition to those external sources, so the pollutants, the nutrients and sediment that are coming from outside of the lakes, we also are dealing with internal loading in these shallow lakes that have very large surface areas. When we last spoke in front of this board, I think about 3 years ago, we talked about this a little bit, and that this is really a problem in the summer, which reduces water clarity and helps to fuel those blue-green algae blooms when they're at their worst. So we can reduce internal loading of nutrients by building breakwalls to decrease wave energy and increase aquatic plants to stabilize the sediment and reduce wave energy near the shorelines. With increased vegetation being one of our targets, we know that in some areas, plant growth may become a nuisance to navigation. And so in the lake plan, it outlines ways to work with residents in those areas to develop kind of site-specific management solutions for when vegetation does become a nuisance. In the lake plan, we also have goals for recreation, habitat, aquatic invasive species to improve the ecosystem and just increase overall enjoyment of the lakes, given that there's such a treasured resource in the area. And so, increasing the quality and quantity of habitat, preventing the spread of invasive species, and improving recreational use by looking to expand facilities, increasing access to information, and then improving water quality, which kind of water quality is tied into all of this. I also want to point out that this plan is not a DNR plan, it's not a Fox-Wolf plan, and it's not a county plan. It's really a community plan that reflects the input that we've received from lake users and area residents through just an enormous effort to get the community to be involved and help develop the lake plan. We worked really hard throughout the entire lake planning process to garner public support and public input. So we really ensured that the process was open and transparent. And the management actions that are listed in the lake plan are based on science, as well as the priorities and desires of the input that was collected. So in addition to individual stakeholders in the region, we also worked with a lot of organizations and other entities within the Winnebago Waterways Recovery Area to develop the recommendations in the lake plan. So just as the plan doesn't belong to any one entity, neither does implementation. It's going to require a community effort. So numerous individuals and organizations will need to take ownership and lead implementation of various management actions that are outlined in the lake plan. So we are really excited to see the number of people and organizations that engaged during the planning process who are now interested in working with us on projects or taking the lead on various projects going forward. Oh, I forgot about the transition. Sorry, let me get through this with all these clicks. There we go. Okay. So just wanted to highlight some things. As I said earlier in the presentation, we're wrapping up phase 4, which is the lake plan. It's been submitted to the DNR. We're in the kind of the final stretch here. But as we've been doing that, we've also worked with partners on implementation projects. Some of the things that your Winnebago County Land and Water Department are partners with us on, that we're working with them and collaborating on projects, include the evaluation of break wall effectiveness, to look at just to be able to document the effectiveness of break walls on improving water quality, on a regional AIS prevention program, and on a restoration project in Lake Butamore with Terrell's Island and Samers Bay. It's been really great to work with the staff at Winnebago County and make some of these big projects happen. So we want to thank your county staff who have been involved in the project, the steering committee that's been really helped to drive and move this project along, the County Land Conservation Committee, and the members of the executive committee for their ongoing support. I think it's truly amazing to see just how well the different counties and within counties have been able to work together to see this through. And we're really looking forward to seeing the work on the ground as a result. All right, that's all I have.
Very good. We'll open it up for some questions. I had already seen some call-ins. So first, I will call on Supervisor Snyder, followed by Supervisor Powers. Please go ahead, Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Corin or Jessica, would it be appropriate for you guys to mention the partnership we have with REI as well, and the Roundup program they're going to be implementing from, I believe there's an Appleton store opening up on Friday, and then a little later on in the month, we're going to have a Roundup. So why don't you mention that, Corin?
Yeah, Jessica, did you want to talk about that? Because I know you were working directly with them.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So as we gain momentum with watershed recovery, businesses are starting to take note and want to be involved. So REI, which is a new sporting goods store coming to the Appleton area, as part of their grand opening, they identify nonprofits who are working to protect the environment to help raise funds for that nonprofit. So in October, oh shoot, I wasn't prepared with the dates for that. So there's a week long as part of their grand opening that they will be asking customers if they want to round up for the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance and the Winnebago Waterways program to give their spare change to our cause. So that's just one way that businesses are starting to get involved. Over the past few years, we've been able to make a lot of contacts with local businesses, and we expect that financial support for the program will continue to grow.
So those dates, I just looked it up, Jess, it's from September 19th through October 2nd for the roundup at REI.
Great. Thanks a lot, girls. Keep the good work up.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just, I'm just going to quick add to wrap up. So Corinne said the 12-page document was included in your packet handout. That is an overview of the full lake management plan. I believe you also got a link to the full lake management plan, which is about a 100-page document. We think it's easy to read. We hope that some of you will take the time to open it up and contact us with questions you have. There's a lot to learn about the lakes in that document. And then that 100-page document is also backed up with many topic reports. So every topic in the lake management plan has a full research report behind it, that if you really want to dig into any one of the topics, you can go online and find that topic report and contact us if you have any questions.
I see a few more call-ins, so next I'll call on Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question for Corinne or Jessica or Chad. I remember when my first grandchild was born and my daughter and I took him on walks around the lake at Menominee. Before we could get back in the car, we'd have to clean off the buggy wheels because there's so much goose poop. And I know the Canadian geese are protected. And coincidentally, my first grandchild just went to UW La Crosse today. He's on his way to La Crosse today. But I'm just wondering, what is the impact of all that goose poop on our lakes?
So we don't have, numbers to be able to say exactly how impactful they are, but we know that goose poop and dog poop coming, from urban areas or the goose poop from shoreline areas, can carry things like, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but can carry different bacterias with them, which can be impactful to, human health, but also do transport some of the phosphorus during rainstorms into the lakes. The one thing that we can really do to reduce the geese in, the parks and surrounding shoreline areas is to promote the plantings of native vegetation. Because when you have a nice manicured lawn, geese are grazers. And that's just like they love that because they can easily graze and get all the food that they want. Where if there's some taller grasses or some native vegetation along the shoreline, which is also happens to be great for habitat and water quality, you reduce the amount of geese that are going to congregate and, pile up.
Thank you. And thank you, Supervisor Powers, for the question. So next I'll call on Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Brunn. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if I missed it, but could one of you address the involvement that we've had from the farming community, the agricultural sector, in this project? Because I think they're obviously intricately involved, or should be intricately involved. And I think I missed that if you said anything about it. Thank you.
Yep, Corinne, I'll take that one if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Vicki. For the development of the lake plan, the input that we got was majority from the land conservation departments. We worked a lot with NRCS, we worked a lot with DNR, and we worked with a few local farmers that
Okay,
we're
that's nice.
working on with some projects. We will be doing more producer outreach as the project moves on. So we did already receive a grant from the EPA for the Great Lakes, through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, to work with Fond du Lac County, who we're contracting with 2 farms there to do some demo projects, so we can get farmers out to other farmers who want to do more conservation work, so they can see what's working and what's not right locally. So what we want to be able to do is build farmer support for other farmers. I can't show up on a farm and say, hey, we want you to do conservation. And some of our, even our conservation professionals, you know, that only goes so far. But if we can get other farmers to be testing practices on their landscape, show that it can work, and then invite farmers out to those types of events. So we're working to do that. At the same time, NRCS has expanded its demonstration farm network, and Winnebago County is a part of that. So we're going to be seeing a lot more farmer to farmer education in the upcoming years. It's really an exciting time for conservation, because there's a lot of movement and there's a lot of farmers who are ready to get engaged in the conversation. So part of the grant that we have is not only to do practices on the field, but it's also to hold meetings with farmers to talk about this issue and engage farmers in the process to help come up with the solutions.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you, and thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Brunn, followed by Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Brunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say that an important part of this is health, the health department. You had a graphic of 200,000 people use Lake Winnebago for their drinking water. And to me, if you don't have good water, you don't have good health. So the health department should be maybe someone that should have some involvement in this. They get involved in a lot of other things, as our next presentation is going to show. I think water quality is something else that maybe we should tap on their expertise as far as what water does for our bodies and our health in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brunn.
Chairman,
Next, oh, please.
do you mind if I just quick respond to his comment?
Of course, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for that comment. You know, we do show on the lake plan that over 200,000 people get their drinking water from Lake Winnebago, but I want to reassure you that the plants are really doing an excellent job, and they're able to filter out the microcystin that are the toxins that cause the problems in and that are toxic in the blue-green algae blooms. We went and toured and talked with all the treatment plants in the area to learn about their treatment process and how the quality of the lake impacts the finished product that goes into people's homes. And you know, the real concerns that we heard from them are, you know, lead in the pipes and that kind of thing. The microcystin are on their radar, and they're really doing everything they can to make sure that that continues. What does happen at the treatment plants because of poor water quality in the lakes is it drives up treatment costs, because it requires, you know, more treatment, more chemicals, more processing to get the microcystin down to what it needs to be for it to be safe and at the finished end. So I would love to engage with the health department on the blue-green algae topic, because having those harmful algal blooms be so dense in areas that are popular for recreation or popular for people to have their dogs and stuff in the water, that is a real public health concern. And so I think that would be something that we could definitely collaborate on.
Thank you. So next I will call on Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Buck. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2006, the DNR published the Wisconsin Land Legacy Report, which, among all the other bodies of water and land in the state, featured the lakes of the Winnebago area. How does this report, management report, fit in with that overview that DNR had established? It seems to me this is part of that big blueprint. Would Chad, being with the department for so long, be able to address that, or perhaps Corin or Jessica?
Chad Casper, would you like to respond to that one first?
I think I'm going to defer to Jessica or Corinne. I am not that familiar with that report. Are either of you familiar with that with the DNR?
No, I'm not that familiar with that particular report. I know there are several other reports from the DNR that we've used as we've developed a lake management plan, and the DNR were directly involved. Can you put it a little closer?
Yeah, it's quite a publication.
I'm putting it on my list to read.
It addresses all of the bodies of water and the land, and it specified that the lakes of the Winnebago system was classified as moderately protected, and that it appears that the plan that you are involved in is the action plan for what the DNR had established for our area 15 years ago. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. It looks like you provided them with some homework, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I picked that item up at one of the WCA conventions maybe 10 years ago.
Very good. Appreciate it, Supervisor Eisen.
Chairman, could I take a minute just to comment on that? I'm not familiar with that. Is that okay?
Please.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that report either, so I am going to take a look into it a little bit. But just wanted, DNR has acknowledged that the Winnebago waterways are special to the state. They are important. They are, I mean, we've covered how large they are, how many people utilize the lakes. But what we haven't been able to see is the Winnebago system kind of be highlighted in terms of recovery. And that's what we're hoping to do with this lake management plan, is to really elevate the conversation at the state level to talk about how important these lakes are and get more funding to come into this region to help protect them or to help restore them. And that's one of the main goals with this lake management plan, is to be able to highlight the lakes in terms of the grants that are available or even the state budget in the future.
Thank you. Very good. We'll move on to the next speaker. That's Supervisor Buck, followed by Supervisor Defferding. Please go ahead, Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you guys for all your good work as a fisherman and somebody who uses a lake quite frequently for recreation. Just appreciate all your good work. You know, going back to 1634, you know, Winnebago is known as the people of the stinky water. So this problem has probably been going on for quite some time. But kind of a question on the phosphorus: is this all due to, you know, the increased phosphorus levels or this increased green-blue algae, or is a lot of it, you know, with the topography of the lake being a shallow lake, I guess? And I'll end my question there. Thank you guys again.
Jess, should I do that? Take that question?
Yeah, if you're going to talk about the history of the lakes a little bit, that's where I'd like you to start if you can.
Okay. Well, thank you for that question. Yeah, the Winnebago lakes have, they do sit low in the landscape. A large drainage area drains to the lakes, but what a lot of people don't know is that they used to be basically riverine marshes. They weren't these huge, open pools of water. I mean, Lake Winnebago was bigger than the upper Pool Lakes when it came to open water, but there was still a lot of marsh. And, marshland is stinky. The soils and stuff are just, it's a smell you have to learn to love. But what we're dealing with now, as far as the lakes being in poor shape, is different than them being marshy and riverine. And that is because of the amount of phosphorus pollution that has come from human activities on the landscape, and from some of the point source, the wastewater, what's the word, outflow. And that's what we're really trying to address. There's always going to be natural kind of background phosphorus. The lakes are naturally eutrophic, which means they're naturally productive. They should be getting nutrient loading. They're going to always be a little bit murky. They're going to be shallow, and we should see in a well-balanced system a lot of productivity from plants and animal life. And we're not seeing the plants, and we're seeing the blue-green algae, and we're seeing the low water clarity because of the phosphorus and sediment pollution. Jess, did you want to jump in at all about that?
Yep, I think that's great.
Okay.
Unless you have more questions.
Very good. Thank you. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Defferting. Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Has there been, like, other than, the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance, I mean, has there been other non-government community partners that you've been working with in regards to mitigating blue-green algae and cleaning up the lake, cleaning up Lake Winnebago? Yeah, I guess go ahead with that. We'll start with that.
Jess, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. There are a lot of organizations working to improve the lakes, and we are one of many partners. So we've worked closely with Butamore Conservation Club, with Ducks Unlimited has been very active in the system. Those two clubs are working on projects really in the lake or near shore of the lake. U.S. Fish and Wildlife has been a great partner in this region, and we anticipate even becoming a larger partner in the region. There's many more, and I think that as we grow and expand our research, we're going to continue to get more partners. I think that I'm always surprised at the unlikely partners that come to the table as you build success, right? So organizations that may not consider themselves an environmental organization or a water organization, I believe are going to come in and start helping the cause. We've seen that we just did our annual watershed cleanup, which is just a garbage cleanup. And we did that around the lakes, and we had different church groups and Boy Scouts and businesses send employees out. So I think there's a lot of potential partners in the system. There's a lot of great work being done already. There's just a lot more to do. So the more partners, the better. But I'm leaving a lot out. Corinne did share a slide that had a lot of the partners that were part of plan development in it, and they're also highlighted in the plan itself.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and I actually did participate in that cleanup as well in Menominee Park. So yeah, that's it's great to see that we're getting a lot more community partners involved with this, and I think that's something that we should certainly promote and continue on, because I mean, you know, we're all involved in this, and it'd be great to. It's great to see that that you guys are starting to see a lot more success and a lot more community partners come forward and say, "What can I do to help?" So indeed. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Duffy. Next speaker, Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
I know this summer the plan was to lower the water level to promote vegetation growth to help prevent the algae growth. Did you see any success in that project at all, or?
So that's, thank you for that question. It's going to take a few years of consistent water level management based on the strategy that was put into place for 2019. And that did lower the water level about 1.2 inches, so about the length of a paper clip, and extended the fall boating season. So the water doesn't get drawn down right away in September. It happens in October to allow people to enjoy boating further in the year. Really, because the last couple of years have had such record-breaking precipitation, especially in the springtime, it's been really difficult for the Army Corps to stay on target to the strategy that that they kind of decided to go with based on stakeholder input. And so it's difficult to say whether that strategy has, you know, for sure been effective. We are doing aquatic plant surveys. We're doing water quality sampling to be able to assess the effectiveness of those changes. I know anecdotally, I've heard that there is more vegetation in some areas of the lake this year. I haven't analyzed the results from the aquatic plant surveys that we just recently completed, but that could show that maybe the strategy was effective if all of the data line up, because there were about 2 weeks in the spring where the Army Corps did have the water levels for Lake Winnebago on target, and that was during the critical plant growth period. So that's really the time that's super critical for the aquatic plants as they start to emerge to be able to get access to the sunlight. So if water levels are where they should be, then more areas of the lake are getting that sunlight that goes all the way to the bottom to allow those plants to grow and photosynthesize. But hopefully we'll be able to assess in a few years, look at the data to see if there are any trends related to the water level strategy. Thank you.
Do you think too, if we would build some sediment ponds, like, you know, you can put 16,000 gallons of liquid manure on an acre of land, and a lot of those fields have drain tile, and then we get 2 inches of rain. Do you think if we strategically had some sediment ponds, that wouldn't do good to the waterway?
Yeah, we are looking at increasing the storage capacity on the landscape as one of the solutions for not only helping with water level management in the lakes, but improving the water quality, because we would be reducing the amount of polluted runoff going into the lakes. So I think you're right on with that suggestion, and it is recommended in the plan. We are right now trying to figure out if we can work with Army Corps to have Army Corps do a study like that for us. What we would want them to, what we need someone to do is to analyze the landscape and see where storage capacity, water storage capacity has been lost on the landscape, and then where storage should go, where a simple sediment basin should go. In the lower Fox River, which is between Lake Winnebago and the Bay of Green Bay, we're working with Outagamie County. We've got grant funding to build some sediment basins in the watershed, and we're monitoring those right now to determine how effective they are at trapping phosphorus and managing larger runoff events. So right now we've got 3 years of monitoring data, and it's looking promising, but we're waiting for that report from UW Green Bay to say that yes, that is a solution that we should use throughout the watershed.
Thank you.
If I could just chime in for our department, that is one of the practices we're really pushing within the Land and Water Conservation Department, to try and get more of those on the landscape, because they are so effective. They're a permanent practice that is going to settle out the sediment. It provides habitat. You can capture some of the sites, hundreds of acres of watershed can drain to one individual site. We just had a project that was completed just west of Oshkosh off of 91 and F, and we're ponding about, I think it's about 10 acres of water, and there's over 100 acres draining to that one site. So a really good practice to do, and we're definitely promoting that within our department.
Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, Supervisor Binder. Seeing no other call-ins, just want to thank all three of you for taking the time and being with us this evening. Certainly thank you for the presentation and the information, and absolutely thank you for all your efforts in regards to the so thank you again.
Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Very good. All right, so moving on down to the final presentation this evening. That is Health Equity in Winnebago County with our Health Director, Doug Gearin, also Nikki Uharty from the Health Department. Director Gearin, you want to start?
You bet. Thanks, your Chairman. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about something besides COVID recently. Tonight, I did want to address from the last presentation that we do have a couple of websites on blue-green algae and on inland water sampling. So we contract with UWO to do sampling at several locations throughout the county and report on a weekly basis what the findings are in terms of bacteria are at those locations, just as an indication for residents. We also maintain a page on blue-green algae. We post all of the boat launches and other access points within the county with information about blue-green algae, and typically have put out a press release and other additional information during the year related to that. Not as much this year. And so we've worked with the DNR on that. We've also worked with USGS on working on applying for some grants for enhancing surveillance using satellite imagery. We do have some NOAA satellite links on our website where you can actually pull up satellite pictures and kind of see what the density of cyanobacteria are in the lakes, if you get a chance to see that. So, but not to belay our conversation for the rest of the evening here on health equity. With me tonight is Nikki Uharty. She is our policy and equity coordinator for the health department. That's a position that we created about 3 years ago. And really, the essence of this is when we think about health, do we think that people should live a longer life or a shorter life because of what zip code they live in, or because of the color of their skin, or because of how much money they make? You'd think not, but that is the case. It's the case in the United States, it's the case in Wisconsin, and it is also the case even within Winnebago County. And so Nikki is here tonight to explain a little bit more about health equity as it relates to where we live right now. So Nikki, please take it away.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay. Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. I know I'm the last one of the night, so hopefully I won't take too much of your time. Just a quick overview. I'll go over a little bit of background, share some Winnebago County specific data, talk about what policy has to do with equity, and then share a little bit about the statewide racism as a public health crisis declaration and action commitments. And this is really just meant to share some data and information with you all and create awareness. So when we think about health, oftentimes people think about going to the doctor or individual behaviors right away. But this model here shows that health is actually a lot more than just those few individual behaviors and going to the doctor. There's actually a wide range of factors that are impacting our health. And you can see at the bottom of this model that there's actually about 50% of our health outcomes are determined by social, economic, and environmental factors that people often don't think of when they think about health. These things are things like education, housing, transportation, employment, income, things like that. And then just to make sure that we're all on the same page, wanted to share these definitions quick. So when we talk about a health disparity, we mean that's a difference in health status and mortality groups across population. An example here would be breast cancer rates are higher among women than men, versus a health inequity, which is that difference in the health status and mortality rates across population groups that are systemic, avoidable, unfair, and unjust. So an example here is that Black women and white women experience similar rates of breast cancer, but Black women tend to die at a higher rate of breast cancer than white women due to inequitable access to care. When we talk about health equity, we use the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation definition, which is that health equity means everyone has a fair and just opportunity to be as healthy as possible. To achieve this, we need to remove obstacles to health like poverty, discrimination, power imbalances, and the consequences that result from these things like lack of access to good jobs with fair pay, quality education and housing, safe environments, and healthcare. Oftentimes too, when we talk about equity, there tends to be some confusion around equality and equity. So I want to share this graphic also from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The top half shows a depiction of equality, where the bottom half shows equity. So equality is really about sameness, where equity is about fairness. Equality ensures that everyone gets the same thing, and equity ensures that everyone gets the thing that they need. So you can see in that top half of the image that everyone has the same bike. That's equality, but it's not working well for everyone. Where in the bottom half, when we use a more customizable approach with equity and see what people really need, that works better. And sometimes it can actually be a waste of resources if we're just giving everyone equal things. For example, if I asked everyone on the Zoom call if a size 8 men's shoe worked, I'm sure that wouldn't work for everybody. So if I gave that all to you, it'd all be equal, but it wouldn't work well for everybody. So just another way to think about equality versus equity. Across the United States, Wisconsin, and even in our own county, there are differences in opportunity for health based on your zip code, the amount of money that you make, your socioeconomic status, your ability status, LGBTQ identification, race and ethnicity. And these health inequities and differences emerge when some individuals and groups gain more than others from having consistently better access to opportunities and resources over the course of their lives. There's data that shows that fewer opportunities and resources for health are among groups that have been historically marginalized, such as people of color, people living in poverty, people with physical and mental disabilities, and people who identify as LGBTQ. These differences don't often arise on their own. They're typically the result of policies and practices at many levels over time that have created these barriers to good health. And I'll share some specific examples of policies and practices later. And these are really about structural inequalities, not necessarily individual practices, but more built into the structures and institutions. So within the health department, we have an internal health equity team that's been going on, I believe, for about 3 or 4 years now. And so we wanted to see what the data told us about Winnebago County. We know that there's these differences within the state, within the nation, but we wanted to see what does the data tell us about our county specifically. So we created this little data report summary. It was included in your packet, and the link is here as well on this slide, which we've actually updated since the last time you've seen this, probably a little bit. And this talks about some data both on the determinants of health and some health outcomes data. The report has much more data included in it than I will cover in this presentation for sake of time. It also has much more in-depth explanations of the data. And all the data is specific to Winnebago County unless otherwise noted. So one of the things you'll find in this report is this graph here. This shows male life expectancy in Winnebago County by income level. So you can see that as income level increases, so does life expectancy. This graph shows that males with the lowest income are dying on average 11 years earlier than males with the highest income. So then we want to think about why is that. There's a large body of evidence and research that has demonstrated income as a determinant of health. We think about it, a higher income increases people's ability to access essential elements needed for a healthy life, like safe living conditions, healthy foods, quality health care, and education. Another piece of data here in Winnebago County, according to the 2019 Winnebago County Youth Risk Behavior Survey, 40% of students who identified as LGBTQ, or lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, reported seriously considering attempting suicide in the last 12 months, compared to 12% of students who identified as straight and cisgender. So big disparities here. And then talking a little bit about what does racism have to do with all of this? Because we can see that there are inequities based on more than just race and ethnicity, but we do want us to talk about racism specifically. We'll share some local data that shows health outcomes and determinants by health, race, and ethnicity. Racism causes persistent racial discrimination in more sectors than just health, including housing, education, and employment. There's been more than 100 studies that have linked racism to worse health outcomes, and research shows that racism is a determinant of health and is linked to poor health outcomes. In 2018, the statewide Wisconsin Public Health Association passed a resolution declaring racism as a public health crisis, and since then, a statewide initiative was created for organizations to also sign on to this racism as a public health crisis declaration. The impact of race on health stems largely from differences in access to resources and opportunities that can hurt or enhance health. People of color have consistently faced barriers to opportunity and good health due to a history of unfair laws and practices. So again, it's more so about the structural and institutional discrimination that's built into policies and practices, often unintended, not necessarily referring to any type of individual racism here. And if none of this really stands out to you, there's also a business case to be made for racial equity. A report from the Kellogg Foundation said that by 2050, our country stands to realize an $8 trillion gain in GDP by closing the US racial equity gap. Now I'm going to share a little bit of data for Winnebago County specific by race and ethnicity. And just sharing this because this is why we want to talk about race as it relates to equity. We do have data that shows us that there are some issues, and we want to create awareness and be able to take action to improve these issues. There was a report that came out in 2018 that ranked Wisconsin as the worst in the US for racial inequality. This was based on measures like median household income, home ownership rates, and incarceration rates. Typically, when you think of Wisconsin and the United States overall, you wouldn't think that we would be the worst for racial inequality. But then share this with people, and then they often think, well, that's the bigger cities like Madison and Milwaukee, not here. That's not having an impact here. So I wanted to look at our county specifically and see what the data tells us. So this graph here shows Winnebago County's total population by race and ethnicity. You can see that there's about 11% people of color in Winnebago County, which comes out to be about 19,000 people. Now, if we look at another graph, this is race and ethnicity among Winnebago County's elementary students. You can see here it's actually about 22% students of color. So this shows us that we have some shifting demographics in the county, and our younger generations are more racially and ethnically diverse. And we know that people's health outcomes are being impacted by race and ethnicity. So we want to be able to make sure that we have an inclusive and welcoming community where race and ethnicity aren't hindering people's potential opportunities and aren't shaping their health outcomes. This graph here shows children in poverty by race and ethnicity in Winnebago County. You can see some pretty stark differences here. Children living in poverty can be linked to differential access to opportunities and resources. Parents' wealth often shapes their children's educational, economic, and social opportunities, which can in turn shape their health throughout their life. And this can compound over a person's lifetime and across generations. And children living in poverty may experience lasting effects on academic achievement, health, and income into adulthood, and are oftentimes at risk for many more health issues. This graph here shows the average age of death by race and ethnicity for both Winnebago County and Wisconsin. The blue bars show you the Winnebago County numbers. You can see that on average, non-Hispanic white people are living longer than all the other racial and ethnic groups listed, and there's more than a 20-year gap between non-Hispanic white and non-Hispanic Black. Exposure to chronic stress negatively impacts our health, and there's been research that has shown that chronic stress from racism and discrimination plays a big part in these inequitable health outcomes. Having these chronic stress levels is a constant release of cortisol, which is then a constant activation of our stress response and can wear down on the body system, resulting in higher rates of disease and early death. So because COVID is on the top of most people's minds these days, and we've been hearing different stuff in the media, news, whatever you want to call it, about COVID-19 disproportionately impacting people of color, we wanted to look at our own data and see if we saw any differences there. So this graph here, the orange bar shows the confirmed positive cases of COVID-19 in the Winnebago County Health Department jurisdiction. That's about 6.8%, whereas our population of who identifies Hispanic or Latino in that same jurisdiction is only 3.5%. So this shows that COVID is disproportionately impacting Hispanic and Latino groups in our health department jurisdiction. And I say health department jurisdiction because our COVID information does not include the portions of City of Menasha and City of Appleton that fall within Winnebago County, whereas the rest of the data in this report is for all of Winnebago County. Wisconsin has some of the worst racial inequalities in COVID-19 cases and deaths, and this could stem from jobs with limited paid leave, the inability to work from home in certain jobs. The Latino population is overrepresented in the essential workforce and service jobs. So these could be some of the factors that might be playing into these disproportionate numbers that we see. So then earlier I said that these differences in opportunity don't often arise on their own, but are typically the result of policies and practices that have created barriers. Policies and practices can have unintended consequences and then result in these inequities. And also want to share that we're not sharing any of this data to make anyone feel bad, guilty, place blame, anything like that. We're just sharing because when we know better, we do better. And knowing this information can help us move forward with a different perspective and make better informed decisions. So probably one of the best known policies and practices out there is the practice of redlining, where the federal government created home loan programs in the 1930s to help Americans finance their homes. To decide who got home loans, they color-coded maps. In the red areas, there was typically no loans available, and developers were legally allowed to discriminate. White suburbs often came with overtly racist covenants that denied entry to Black people. And you can see from the statistic here on the screen from 1934 to 1962, 98% of home loans in the US went to white families. And we can see some of this still impacting people today, where we know that a lot of people are able to pass down wealth from generation to generation through their homes. To bring it a little bit more local, there was evidence collected by a University of Vermont historian who found that Oshkosh and other cities in the Fox Valley area were known as sundown towns, which were communities that made it clear that Black people were not welcomed after sunset. And this was a result of de facto segregation. This is something that was built into structures. And to produce a more inclusive, integrated city region, we need to start by acknowledging our history of exclusion to not only better understand our past, but how to move forward and take action to intentionally create a welcoming and inclusive community where everyone has the same opportunity to thrive. Now to share maybe some more current examples, school funding based on property taxes is another policy that can result in these inequities. Students in low-income neighborhoods often receive an inferior education than students in wealthier areas. There can be employment discrimination based on your LGBTQ identity. Until June of this year, when the US Supreme Court ruled that LGBTQ workers were protected against sex discrimination, Wisconsin state law actually only prohibited employment discrimination based on sexual orientation, but did not explicitly prohibit on gender identity or transgender status. And then I mentioned also we would talk a little bit more about this sign-on declaration. The public health community must acknowledge racism and advocate for equitable policies to improve these inequities. This is based on that Wisconsin Public Health Association's Racism as a Public Health Crisis resolution that passed back in 2018. There's a statewide Healthiest State initiative that started in 2017 and determined racism as a public health crisis was one of their 6 statewide health equity priorities. The goal of this is for organizations and individuals to sign on to the declaration and commit to some actions to improve this. There's over 100 organizations throughout the state so far that have signed on, including health departments, municipalities, nonprofit organizations, health systems, community groups. And also included in the packet was the language for this declaration and the action commitments. At the health department, we've been talking about this for quite a while. We actually gave a very similar presentation to our Board of Health in October of last year. But of course, COVID has slowed down a lot of this work. We want to do a similar presentation to this, Racism as a Public Health Crisis training for our staff, and then sign on as an organization. We're already doing a lot of this work that's mentioned in the action commitments, but just to ensure that we can continue to improve upon it. And then to note too, the most recent city to sign on to this declaration was the city of Green Bay, along with about 15 local organizations in that area. And then wanted to share just a few examples of concrete actions and practices for organizations that we've seen different organizations do so far regarding this work. You can do an organizational assessment, look at hiring practices and job descriptions, do policy and procedure reviews. We've seen that there are different policies that can create unintended consequences, so taking a deeper look at those. There's a lot of different health and racial equity assessment tools out there. Making sure that your staff is diverse and representative of the community that you're representing. Doing ongoing staff training, embedding it in organizational plans, having staff training, staff assessments, making sure public materials are in multiple languages that are represented in the community, talking to the community, seeing what it is that they think could be improved. So just a few examples. And we, as I mentioned, we have done a few of these things that's led by our health equity team internally. But, you know, really just wanted to share a little bit more about this. So what we're doing in the health department, but we know that health inequities are impacting people in all different sectors, not just health. So this work really needs to happen within all of the different departments. And I know there's been discussion about a diversity committee at the county level. And so just another reason that we think that's a great idea. And that is all I have for you.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and open it up. Doug, first, before we open up for questions, any other comments before we open up questions and comments from the board? Dr. Gear?
Thank you, Chairman. Nice job, Nikki. This is, really just meant to hopefully get you to start thinking about some of the policies and practices that we have. As Nikki mentioned, we know that much of the results of our policy sometimes are unintended consequences, and I think the more we know, the better we can be, and so this is just a way to help engage you in understanding that and helping us be better as we move forward. So I look forward to your partnership with this. I'd like to certainly see more than just the health department working on these issues, and it takes all our departments within the county system to be mindful of this, to have a meaningful impact in the community, and of course our many community organizations that are working on this already as well. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Very good, thank you. So we'll open it up for questions and comments from the board. So first I'll call on Supervisor Nussbaum, followed by Supervisor Defferty. Please go ahead, Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To solve this racism problem, we need to look at the root causes. One major reason is the news media spreading lies and causing division, hatred, and violence. This is deception, is fanning the flames of racism. It's very plain to see. Anyone who wants to know the truth, I suggest you ask Jesus to show you. It's easy. It only takes a few seconds. Try it. Dear Lord, show us the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferting, followed by Supervisor Norton. Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a great presentation. I'm glad that that we're addressing this issue, because this is something that is a long systemic issue with Wisconsin. I think oftentimes a lot of people think of that racism and racial inequality exists in the southern states, but they don't realize that actually Wisconsin incarcerates more African Americans per capita than any other state in the union, and it's been that way for years. And we have not really made any headway in changing that. And one of the things that I really think that we need to focus on is what we can do on the criminal justice angle, and and its impact, not just with the people involved, but also their families and also their local economy. And wanted to know what we can do for Winnebago County, specifically with Winnebago County in regards to our jails, and in regards to how we're enforcing the law in not just Oshkosh, and but also Neenah, Menasha, parts of Appleton, everywhere throughout the county. What we can do to address any particular systemic racism issues in regards to criminal justice and law enforcement. Wanted to know if anyone would be able to answer that question, and what we can do to start on that.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting.
I certainly don't have the answers. Nikki's presentation, there's a whole page of types of activities that are good starting points for organizations that want to take a deeper dive into that. We certainly have, I think there's a keen awareness of many of the issues that you mentioned, Supervisor Defferting, and I think having a more deliberate conversation at the county level involving our county departments is a starting point for being better about this as we move forward.
All right, thank you. One other thing too is, I am supportive of the Diversity Affairs Committee, but I just felt like that we needed to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of things and the structure in regards to that, so it can be properly, so it can be effective. And wanted to know what your thoughts are in regards to that, this concept of a Diversity Affairs Committee, what we can do to make sure that it actually is effective.
Like with any other initiative, I mean, we've got to have buy-in at the at the department head levels of the organization, from the county board, from the county executive, and in order to make it a priority, and demand that we are transparent and show what it is that we're doing, and be able to report back progress on these sorts of things. And so as we're ready to perhaps launch a diversity committee of sorts, I think the initial part of that, or that committee, is really making sure those involved are up to speed and understand the issues, and that they set very concrete and specific goals and objectives for making sure that we're trying to identify the issues in a very systemic way that we can report back our progress on. So I think this is a journey. It's not, this isn't a sort of activity where, you know, we say we're just going to do this and we do it. It's really a journey of bringing people along and educating them as we go and learning. It's not you know, it's not a simple thing to do, and it takes time, and it takes you know, a deliberate effort to do so. And Nikki, if you have anything else you'd like to add to that.
The other thing I would add is making sure to involve community members as well. There's a quote saying out there that those who are closest to the issues are closest to the solutions as well. You know, people who have the lived experience are going to know best how those issues can be improved. So making sure it's not, you know, just county employees or county board supervisors, but that we're also including community partners and community members so that we are the most effective that we can be.
Thank you, and thank you for your question and comment, Supervisor Defferty. Next speaker is Supervisor Norton. Please go ahead, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, this issue is very close to me, and I care much about it. In the last month, I have participated in a number of few webinars on this subject. I'm a part of the Healthy Counties Advisory Board, and we had a webinar on this. I know Nikki sat on that about racism as a health issue. Then an issue that I think Brian definitely would have appreciated was a webinar on racism and the criminal system. But more interesting, the interesting one that I participated in, I know Nikki was part of it. There's a group called Imagine Fox Cities. And a couple weeks ago, they had a day-long webinar on the discussion of racism in this community. Hopefully, on 2 of those, I can try to find some way to get the county clerk to email those, because they're not that, one is kind of long, but I think it'll be worthwhile. But you know, Nikki talked about a few counties and places that have passed racism as a health issue. One of them is Eau Claire. And I think what we must do, what Eau Claire did when they passed their resolution, before they passed it, they got together, like Nikki says, community. We need to bring in the people of color, of LGBT, of the Blacks, the Latinos, and probably in this community, the Asians, the Hmong people. In that community, there was indigenous people. In Eau Claire and the other counties, they have not just passed a resolution stating it, they also have mentioned specific goals or things they want to do. I think that's what we have to do. And I think we have to do, as Doug says, and then Nikki says, we have to include those community people, especially those people of color, because that's another thing I got out of the webinar from the Imagine Fox Cities, is that you have to include people of color, especially not just the top people, but all types of people. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox for a second. And when I ask Nikki, in your data, did you find that people of color had a harder time getting mental health, you know, treatment of mental health than maybe white people in this area? And that's one question I would like to know. Thank you, Nikki.
That's some pretty specific data. I'm not sure that exists. I could look into it. I'm guessing it probably would be pretty hard to find for Winnebago County at this local level. I'm sure it exists at some sort of level, but that's something I have to look into.
And thank you, Nikki. And that's one last comment, Mr. Chairman. You know, because one of the Brian definitely brought up about the criminal justice issues, and one issue about criminal justice is the mental health issues and disparities in that wealthy people versus low-income people, and maybe just races. That's why I brought it up. So thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Binder, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Binder.
I'd just like to say, when Mike invited me about 7-8 months ago to attend one of the meetings on diversity, I thought to myself, what diversity? I don't see any problem. But where I live, there is no problem. I live in a good neighborhood. We all got good jobs. But when you actually go into the blighted area of Oshkosh, you'll see the people that are struggling. You know, we had hail damage out here, and I probably seen like 17 roofs put on, and I didn't see one white person on a roof. The people of color, they got here about 7 o'clock and they left about 9 o'clock. I'm sure they weren't paid overtime. I'm sure they didn't have any health care. And it's 6 days a week. You know, we don't see it because we don't live there. If you want to see the diversity, go in the blighted area of Oshkosh and you ride around, you look at them houses, that's what they're living in. And if we don't want to help them, then how are we ever going to change? You know, we can sit in our nice neighborhoods and have our good families around us and say, well, I don't see a problem. That's because we're not looking. We got to open our eyes up. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to keep my mouth closed on this one, but, and I have to admit, when I first read this, I thought, what planet are these people on? Because I'm a very realistic person and I've worked with a lot of programs to help people. But kind of ironically, I was reading something, and there was a quote from James Taylor, for those of you who are from the 70s era. And he basically was asked to give advice on how to make it in life. And he said, 1, avoid addiction. 2, only have children when you can afford to support them. And 3, find your purpose and work at it. And I kind of I had a similar problem when I sat through a report on poverty in the school systems. And even now, as we're talking about all sorts of things, and I hate to make it a racial or a sexual preference thing. I'd rather just look at people who are in poverty situations and how can we help them out. But you know, I think we're creating more divide in our society by labeling people as opposed to just, you know, looking at a broader definition for those people. And they're basically people who have a hard time functioning and making progress in their life. But just my kind of personal opinion on it, whether we're county, we're state, we're federal, blah, blah, blah. Our responsibility is not to make sure everybody's life is wonderful, because this is a survival game. And certainly we as human beings can help each other. I personally have had wonderful support during my life from kind of not my family necessarily, but other people in my life. But I think it's society's job to basically level the playing field. So yes, looking at our policies and practices, not to give favor, just because you have certain qualities doesn't make you special. But we should level the playing field for all people and make sure we're not discriminating. And then we should concentrate, and I think we have in this country, to provide steps out of poverty. And some of the things we're seeing, especially with first-generation immigrants, they don't realize that in the case of the privileged white, it has taken us generations to get where some of us, you know, have come to. So I think that our responsibility as a government entity is to just help to provide those steps, so people who are motivated and want to improve their life don't have obstacles that we've created. So, and again, just because, you know, many of our ancestors came to this country as immigrants. Some of our ancestors came as people of color, and they've had to make their way. And I think we're really naive if we think we're going to make it wonderful for everybody, because we're not. We're going to help the ones who actually want to improve their lives. And you cannot force feed the others. I've had a lot of personal experience there working with people who are basically non-functioning adults. And it's very frustrating, and it's you can't make life better for those people, but you can help people improve their life if they're motivated to do so. And if they're making good choices so they don't put themselves in an impossible position. I just was reading from one of these, one of the situations that, you know, a 29-year-old who has 6 children already, And, you know, that you are not going to get very far in this world. And so that's where you know, it's always what comes first, the chicken or the egg in these situations in our communities. And I can't say I know how to solve it, but I'm concerned that we aren't hearing a voice, you know, kind of pushing back. And instead of us being, you know, thinking that we can fix all of those issues, I think that we have to do a lot more education with the people who are making poor choices and continuing to keep themselves in poverty. So sorry for the soapbox, but I just thought I should share my ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the presentation today. It sets us up for a conversation in a couple of weeks. Mr. Chairman, I hope that when we do get to that conversation, that this board has taken some time to be careful about the language we're using. Tonight we've heard a couple of racialized dog whistles that, in my opinion, don't have any place on this county board, and I sure hope that members of this board will take some time to do some research on their own about the language choices they're making before we get to this point in the subsequent meetings where we are discussing this again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Schellinger. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and close this presentation. I want to thank you, Director Geenan. I want to thank you, Nikki Uharty, for your presentation, your information, and certainly all your efforts. Greatly appreciated. So thanks again.
Thank you.
And with that, that is our final presentation of the evening. So that concludes our agenda. So I will ask Supervisor Albrecht for a motion to adjourn. Supervisor Albrecht?
To adjourn until September 15th at 6 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is second to adjourn until Tuesday, September 15. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.